a very interesting kind of like a skill to have. When you see that something is not working, don't keep on pushing it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but this is hard because I also know a lot of startups who pivot too quickly. Like, I think this is an interesting topic because we also wanted to talk about typical mistakes that startups make. And one of them that I've seen is actually the opposite, is experimenting very quickly and not really sticking with it, like not really delivering the frequency that is needed to see if it really works.
yeah.
And especially maybe younger founders or founders who are slightly less experienced, who come up with a good idea, start running with it, do it, then try it for 2-3 months, didn't get the traction they wanted, hear something else that they find interesting at a conference, or one expert told them, or a buddy told them about this idea, pivot immediately. So I think it's really hard because you have to balance between knowing when it really didn't work or when you just didn't try hard enough somehow, and you have to.
Yeah. I think it's like it's also, it depends on your hypothesis of a business that you're starting, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're like, if I'm going ahead and starting a restaurant in London, I don't have an hypothesis, right? Like the restaurant business model, like maybe like a sushi restaurant, the sushi restaurant business model has been validated, by hundreds of thousands of people across the world, right?
Yeah.
While if I start a new business, I have an hypothesis. If this is a new concept that doesn't exist, or maybe there's like very few players in the market, this is an hypothesis of business, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's also like, where are you basing your hypothesis on, right? Like how did you come up with that hypothesis? What data have you looked at in order to come up with that hypothesis?
But I feel exactly like a lot of founders actually jump this part entirely. They just jump to the idea, to the solution, right? And then they gather the team, they get some tech person to start building it, and they never really think about what is the hypothesis, right? And they don't think really about assumptions, underlying the business model. They don't think even about metrics. And I think the tricky thing with metrics is like, you kind of need them to know whether your hypothesis is true or false, right? But you also need to be agile in them, because sometimes because it's also very hard to kind of set metrics beforehand when you're introducing this completely new product category or new business model, and you go, okay, I guess if we get 10 customers within a month, it's good. And then you're proven that that's a completely ridiculous idea. It's way too low, way too high. So you need to kind of be strict with your metrics, but also flexible. There
has to be some sort of like detective work that the founder has to do in order to find evidence about the hypothesis. As you said, going straight to solution mode is very, very dangerous, because like, I'll give you an example. If you find that if you discover that your app, whatever you're trying to build, so the current solution that is in the market, right, is too difficult to use, let's say. What does difficult mean? Like to me, well, not to me, but difficult is like, what about that is difficult, right? So people, like founders, need to go into they need to start wearing the detective hat and literally like go and like deep into understanding the problem, and also like how much of a problem is that in the eye of your potential customer, right? Because if it's a nice to have problem, is very different than like a must have problem, right?
And also, who even is your customer? This is also like I think 90% of startups casually jump over this question, because it's super hard, because startups especially think, let's just serve everybody, like I worked for a very nice food delivery app, which was a great team. We were all quite young, however, and we just wanted to serve anybody who would order food, or basically anyone who gets hungry sometimes, right? Because like, why would you turn down a sale? So there was really no work done on limiting the target audience. And I completely understand that instinct. And also most of the startup founders and leaders that I speak with that are really in the early phases, they're like, yeah, I know we have to limit our target audience, but we're not really going to do it anyhow. And I think I also understand that you don't want to pin down too much in the early stages, but at least have some idea of which segments could be promising, so you can at least kind of test them in a controlled way and learn from that, rather than casting this super wide net and really not really learning anything.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the classic positioning and targeting fear that a lot of people have, right? Like, oh, if I just pigeonhole myself in that little segment, I'm just gonna say no to a bunch of other people that. And I think there is also a little bit of maybe it depends on the startup, but maybe there is a little bit of pressure from investors as well, that they need big returns, right, in order to make their business model work. And they're not going to invest in a business that has to target a very, very small, segment of the market. So I think there's a little bit of pressure